Hello everyone. In this video, I'll be going over 17 React hooks that you are most likely to see in any React project or in any Next.js project. And at the end of the video, I'll be going over the ones that you're less likely to see but are very much used in React projects in general and in Next.js projects in general. So without wasting much time, let's get into it. Number one on my list is one you cannot escape from. It's quite obvious and is used in almost every React project, almost every modern React project, to correct myself. So that is the useState hook, and let's go in and see how to actually use it in code. The useState hook is used to hold a dynamic value that you want to preserve across renders. So here we are importing useState from React and we are calling the function right here. We destructure the return value of the function, which the first variable here is the count. You can name this whatever you want, and we use it to read whatever the current state is. And the second variable here, or the second function here, is the set count function. You can name this whatever you like, but in React we usually like using the set first before the function name, the function name, and we use it to set the value of the useState. As you can see, we are using it here with the onClick. Whenever this button is clicked, the state is set and the value of the count is incremented. The second hook on my list is the useReducer hook. This hook is used in place of useState when you have a complex state that you want to manage, and useState alone will not be able to just do the job for you. Let's go in and see how it's used. This is a typical way the useReducer hook is used. First of all, you pass in a reducer function which is going to handle the logic of how you're going to store your state, and then you're going to pass in a previous state. We're using this to actually initialize the state at this point. There's an extra init value that you can pass into the useReducer. I advise you go look that on your own. So the useReducer returns a state and a dispatch when destructured. The state is what we are using to display whatever state on the DOM, and then we're using the dispatch to actually update the states in a complex fashion. Here I'm saying I'm dispatching with a type of add to do. So what is going to happen is that when this function is called, whenever I dispatch, this function is going to be called with a previous state and an action. So I'm just going to do action.type. If you can see, we have type here. So I'm going to do action.type, and based on what I have as my type, I'm going to run some certain kind of logic to update the state. So this is a typical way the useReducer hook is used. The third hook on my list is the useContext hook. This is a very important hook, and it helps us prevent prop drilling. What do I mean by prop drilling? You don't have to pass properties that you want to the children via the parent. So if we have a very deeply nested child component, we don't have to pass properties from the parent as argument to the child, and then from that child to his own children. We just have to use the useContext hook, which actually solve the problem for us. So let's go in and see how it is used. Alright, here is a typical example of how the useContext hook is used. So here we are creating a context and we're passing it to this variable called countContext, and we are wrapping in the provider. So you have to actually do this for this to work. You have to wrap the provider around the child component, which is this nested component here. So we are passing in also the count and the set count as the value of this provider, and here in the nested component we are calling the useContext hook with this count context, and we're trying to access set count and count. As you can see, we are trying to increment the value when this button is clicked, and these actually work. So if I come over here to my running application, let me close this up. If I come over here to my running application, let me hit this. I come over here to my running application. Once I click on increment, you see that both the nested, the lower level count, and the top level count increase simultaneously. So once I click this, you see that they increase simultaneously. This is how to actually use the useContext hook. The next hook on my list is the useEffect hook, and this is known to be the most misused hook. This hook should be used with care. and is used to cause side effects. These side effects are used to perform actions outside the React application context. Example, fetching data from an API. So let's go in and see how the useEffect hook can be implemented. So right here we have an effect example component, and I'm trying to use a state here to store our title that we are going to be imputing into this state. And this is how useEffect can be used. It's actually watching the title if there's a change in the title. So whenever there's a change in the title, this triggers the useEffect, and then we are checking here if the title is a valid string, then we are going to alert the title. So that's what we are trying to do right here. So if I move over to the browser and I try to impute maybe a letter R, so you're going to see right here it's going to alert the value R, and when I click OK, you see R appear here in the input value. So this is an example of how to use effect. It just causes an effect, and here we're using it in conjunction with the title, and it's triggering an effect whenever the title changes. The next hook on my list is the useRef hook, and this hook is used to persist a value across the renders, and it doesn't actually causes the component to render when the value changes. So we are going to take a look at it and see how to actually use it and how it works. Right here we have a ref counter, and we are trying to store the state in the useState. We're trying to store a count using the useState hook, and here we're using the useRef hook to actually hold the value. Remember what I said, that useRef doesn't change when there's a render, it persists the value, and when you change the value of a using useRef, it doesn't cause a render. So we are about to experiment with that, and you can see that we are showing you the value of useRef. This is the content by using useRef.current. That is how you access the content, and this is where we are setting the content actually. So we are also incrementing the count by 1 when we click on this button, and then we store the content. We set hold. That means we store the content of whatever the count is, or the current count, using this other button called hold value. So when I go over to the browser, I'm just going to restart refresh, and then I click on increment count. As you can see, the count is incrementing, but hold remains 0. So when we want to hold this number 4, we click on hold value. As you can see, it's not causing any render, so you don't see the value change, but actually the value has been set. So if I keep on incrementing count, you see that we have hold as 4, and if I keep on incrementing, it remains the same. So this is an example of how you can use useRef. Another example is using it to access a DOM element. So we are doing that here. We are actually using it to access this input right here, and then when we call submit, when we try to submit this form, we actually alert the value that this DOM element input holds by calling input.current, which is the current, the current value that the useRef holds, and this is the input, and then we are trying to access the value right here. So if I uncomment this, uncomment this, and then comment this one right here, and then save this, and I go back to my browser, as you can see, I can type in anything. Let me type in good, and then I click on submit, and then you see that it's alerting me good. And this is another way we can use useRef in our components. Another exciting hook to actually use, I find this hook quite useful, is the useSearchParam hook when working with React Router DOM. This is a very common hook to use to access query params easily and also set query params easily. I find myself using this in my React project. So let's go ahead and see how this hook is actually used. To actually use this hook, you have to install React Router DOM. I usually do this when I'm writing a purely React project using Vite. So I can go here in the terminal and I impute npm install React Router DOM and wait for it to install. For me, I already have it installed, so I don't have to wait. So I'm going to go over here, and This is how here we are using the useSearchParam. As you can see, it returns a value that we can destructure to access the URL params and also set URL params. As you can see, we are trying to set the page to 1 here, and we are trying to also display the current params by converting it to string and also showing the value of the page. We are trying to access the value of the page. So this is how to actually access the value params.getPage, and if there is no page param, we are going to just output not set. So if I go over to the browser right here, okay, and yes, so if I go over to the browser here and we have routes search params and I try to set the param, I say set page param. As you can see, we have the current URL as okay, this is an object, current URL params as page equal to 1, and we're converting it to string, if you remember, and we are trying to get the page here, and the page is equals to 1. If I change this to 2, it's going to actually reflect. It's going to see that it reflects. And if I add another param, maybe I'm going to just say and u equals to me, and let's see what we get. So you can see everything is being displayed here. I find this hook very useful, and I see myself using it in almost every React project. So feel free to use it whichever way suits you. The next React hook on my list is the useMemo and the use callback hook. And these hooks are kind of performance hook. They are used to enable your React application become more performant, and I'm going to show you just how it is used or how to use it in your application. Let's go over to the code. So right here we have a state where we are storing an array, and then we are mapping through that value, like the array value, and multiplying by 2. And this could be processor intensive. Imagine we have an array of maybe a million items, and we are trying to map through each item. This can be a slow or something that will take a little bit of time to complete. So what we are doing is we are trying to wrap this with useMemo. Why are we doing so? Is that we don't want this operation to run except the value of data changes. So it's only permitted to run only when data changes. So we don't want it running when data has not changed or when the component is rendering. If we do it this way, this way I commented it. If we do it this way, this is going to run every time there is a render. This is going to run every time the component renders, and this is not what we want, because this can be a slow and very intensive operation to perform. So forget the remaining jargons right here. I'm just trying to do this to show you that this actually works. So when we move over to our browser, as you can see, we have render count at 0, we have decoy at 0, and then we have number of time data is processed as 2. Don't mind that number. This is just like when the function, it has to initialize the function and whatever. So if I click on change decoy, you can see that it's re-rendering. I click on it, it's re-rendering, but we don't have the number of times data is processed changing. We don't have that. But once I click on change data, it actually changes, because now I'm setting that array with a different value, and then it's actually performing the operation, the memory intensive operation. So if I keep clicking on change decoy, nothing happens until I click on change data. And why when I click on change data this actually changes is because I'm imputing a new array, and a new array has a new object reference, which will also cause the state to actually render. If this was a number like 1 and I click on it and it's still 1 I'm giving to the function, I don't think it's going to actually do anything, since it's using it's still the same state. Actually the state did not change. So that's how useMemo works, and I hope I'm able to explain it in the best way possible. It was kind of tough for me. The next hook on my list is the useLayoutEffect hook. This is quite similar to the useEffect hook, but the difference is in the timing. the timing of the useLayoutEffect hook is different from that of the useEffect hook. The useLayoutEffect hook run after all DOM mutations have already been completed and before the layout of the screen is actually painted. The DOM layout is painted to the screen. So the timing is different and is also used to perform some side effects before the layout is painted. So let's go in and see how you can actually use it in code. So right here we are trying to use useLayoutEffect to measure the layout or the size of this div right here before the layout is actually painted or before the DOM is actually painted with the layout. So what we are doing is that we are using this box ref here to assess the div element inside this useLayoutEffect, and we are trying to check, okay, if it is a truthy value, and then we are trying to get the bounding client rect and assess the width and height of that div. So what we are doing is that we are also setting states, which is the set dimension. We're setting it with the width and the height of the div. So that is what we're using useLayoutEffect to do in this component. So if I head over to the browser, this is what we see here. We see the measured box, and also we see the box dimension right here, the width and the height. So, and I gave a little explanation right here. useLayoutEffect runs synchronously after all DOM mutations, allowing you to measure the layout before the browser actually paints. So this is a way of using useLayoutEffect, and you can use it in whatever scenario you want to use it for. Just use it rightly anyways. So we're going to move on to the next hook. The next hook on my list is the useQuery hook or the useSWR hook. Actually, I should be arrested for using this hook because I use it in almost any project that I'm working on, except maybe I'm working in a different team where I didn't start the project with them. I came in and I'm working on a project that they're using something else already, so I go wherever they're using. But I use this very well, and I'm very biased. I don't use SWR very much. I use Tanstack query. So I'm going to go in and show you how it is used. But first of all, you need to know what it's used for, and it's used to effectively fetch data and cache it. So this is a effective way to work with your data APIs and to actually effectively cache the data in a very, very optimized fashion. So let's go in and see how to use it. So here in this component, we are using useQuery from Tanstack React Query. So for you to actually do this, you have to actually install the package. So this is how to do it. I'm just going to go back up. I've done all this before. So this is how to do it. npm install at tanstack/React Query. So once you click enter, it's going to install the package for you, and then you have to also set it up. So let me go to main.jsx. This is a way to set it up. You have to call this query client. You have to create this object right here, and you have to pass it into the query provider, which you wrap around your application and pass this in. So this is the way you set it up. So right here in this query example component, I'm using useQuery. I'm not going to go through useSWR as there might not be enough time. So I'm using useQuery, and I am passing in an object, and we are having our query key here. So what does this query key do? It helps you actually it's just like a way to name your cache. So this data we are fetching from JSON placeholder, the JSON we are fetching, the query key is used to actually name the cache where that data is going to be stored. And one thing I like about useQuery is that if there's another component somewhere else calling useQuery with the same query key as post, is going to actually just fetch the data it has in the cache. It's not going to go again to go and refetch that data or perform the same action because it has already fetched it before. So that is what it does, and that is a very, very good optimization. It does all those for you. You don't have to write any manual code to do that. And then if you want this value to be invalidated and also refreshed in the background, there's a way to actually set it. So go ahead to look at the documentation if you want the value to be invalidated after some time, so I can fetch new values for you in the background asynchronously, there's a way to set that, and that is why I love useQuery. So right here I'm trying to display the post as a list of data, and if I head over to my browser right here, as you can see, we have the post and we have the list of posts that we fetched from the JSON placeholder API. So let me try and reload these. As you can see briefly, you're going to see that loading screen. So it's actually going to fetch it. To show you better, I think I have to go through the network, and if I reload these, let me reload. You're going to see it's going to actually fetch the data, and you can see them displayed over here. So feel free to use useQuery or use SWR. They are a very optimized way. You should not be trying to write this thing by yourself, because this is just like reinventing the wheel. You should not be using the useEffect to fetch posts just by yourself. Use these are more optimized, and I advise you use them. So let's go ahead to the next hook. So the next exciting hook I'm going to be talking about is the useNavigate hook. This hook is probably used in almost every React application that uses React Router DOM. So you use useNavigate hook to access a navigate function that you can use to navigate a user when he clicks on a button to another page. So let's go into the project and see how you can actually use it, or how it's actually used. So inside this simple function, we have the useNavigate, and this is how we're using it. This useNavigate hook actually returns a function, and we usually or traditionally call this function navigate, and it doesn't mean you can't change this name, but it's just tradition, call it navigate. And then here we're calling it here, and we are trying to navigate the user to the home screen whenever the user click this button. So that is what we are trying to do. So before I go to show you how it works in the browser, I want you to understand that you have to also install React Router DOM, and then you have to configure your router in app.jsx, and this is a way to configure it. There's another style also you could use to configure your router. So this is a way to configure it. Right now we have navigate example, which is the component I just showed you at the /navigate route, and this is the home route. So I'm just going to open one of these examples. Let me just open one of these comment one of these examples. I don't think it's working anyways. I just wanted to comment this, but since it's not working, let me just say hello here, right here. Just say hello right here. Okay, let's head over to the DOM. So we have hello, but I'm going to move over to navigate, and here, so we have the button right here. So when we click this, we actually are navigated to the home page. So that is how to use the useNavigate hook. There is one word that stands out in the programming world, and that is called try. What does it mean? It means do not repeat yourself. So this hook helps me not to repeat myself, and it's called useBoolean hook. So this hook helps me not to repeat myself, creating Boolean hooks in every component I want to use a Boolean value. I just kind of use the hook instead. So it's a very super useful hook, and let's go in and see how it is in code. So do not bother yourself about this right here. Right now, let's just go into the useBoolean hook to see how it is implemented. So right here, I am passing in an initial value of false. You can pass in whatever initial value you like. I have a default value of false right here, and I'm using it to set this state right here. And I'm creating several callbacks to set the value of the state, and I'm also returning those callbacks and actually the value of the state right here. So if we head back to this Boolean example, you can see I'm trying to use this to control a simple dialog, a pop-up. When I click on a button, the pop-up comes up, and when the dialog comes up, I click on the button on the dialog and it closes that dialog. So to see how it works, let's head over to the browser. We have the open form button here, and when I click on it, we have this dialog that pops on my face, and when I click submit, this closes up. So you can feel free to use this. I find this very useful. It helps me not to repeat myself, as I said. So feel free to use this in whichever way you like in your React application. Whether you are working on a small, medium, or large scale React project, you might always find a need for this hook. This hook enables the user to copy a text on the layout to his clipboard and to be able to paste it somewhere else or wherever he wants to paste that text. And this hook is called the useCopyToClipboard hook. It's a very important hook, and we are going to see how to create one and also use one in our React code. So let's just dive right in. So right here we have the useCopyToClipboard hook, and then we have the handle copy function which we are passing into this button. So when the user click, the onClick event is fired and the handle copy function is called. Now inside the handle copy function we have this other function which is an asynchronous function called copy, and we are passing in hello world which we want to copy to the clipboard, and then we are trying to catch whatever error and allow the user in case there's an error. Yes, it's good to give a reasonable feedback to the user. So when we click on the useCopyToClipboard function, this is how it's actually created, or this is the content of useCopyToClipboard function. You can see it's a very simple one. We have the useState with an empty string, and what we are doing is that we are creating an asynchronous function called copy, and we are using the Navigator API, the browser Navigator API, to copy the text to the clipboard, and then we are setting copied text. So that is what we are doing, and then we are returning this right here. So if we move over to the browser to see how it works, once I click on the button copy, I'm expected to have hello world copied to my clipboard. So once I click on copy, you see we have copied here, and if I do Ctrl V right here, you have hello world, and this is how to use it, and this is how it works. So feel free to use this whichever way you want to use it in your React project. The next hook we are going to be looking into is called the useDebounce hook, and this hook is an important one. It helps you defer calling a function till a particular period of time, or till when an action stops for a particular period of time. For example, let's say if I want to do a dynamic search, for instance, when the user is typing in text, I want to perform search dynamically. I don't want to be calling the API on every keystroke. So what I can do is I can wait till the user stop typing, or when the user stop typing for a fraction of time, I then proceed to make the call to the API. So even if the user continues later, I keep waiting till the user stop for a fraction of time, and then I call again. So this is a more efficient way of doing the search instead of calling the API on every keystroke. So let's go in and see how the debounce hook is actually implemented and how you can use it in your React application code. Here I'm just trying to make a comparison between using the useDebounce hook to set state and actually just calling the state or setting the state when the user imputes a value. So to see how this works, I'm going to head over to the useDebounce function. But before we go over to the useDebounce function, as you can see, it takes in a callback function, and it takes in a delay in milliseconds. Once I move into the useDebounce function, we have the callback and we have the delay, and here we are setting a timer, or we are setting a timer using the useRef hook, and we're using it as a reference to a timer. And then we have a debounce function which we are also returning. Here we're using use callback to make it more memory efficient, and then we are passing in the args. So what we are trying to do is that we want to delay the callback till when the user maybe stop typing, or when the user stop performing an action for a certain period of time. So the way we are doing this is that we are first going to check if the timer is truthy. We clear the timeout. So we clear timeout if the timer is truthy. Remember, this function will be called and called as the user is imputing the value. This debounce function will be called and called. So once it's called and this is truthy, we clear the timeout. But if it is not truthy, we set a timeout. We set a timeout with the delay we are passing into. Right here is 500 milliseconds. So we set that timeout. So what we are doing is that this function, this callback, will never be called until that delay is met, until the criteria for the delay is met, and this set timeout, whatever is inside the set timeout, is called. If not, we keep clearing that timeout and creating it until the user delays putting in a value for a particular period of time. That is when this callback will now be called or executed, and then we'll have our value set. So to see how this works, I'm just going to head over to the browser and I'm going to type in something. So I'm going to type in, just watch, pay attention how. So as you can see, as I was typing fast, you didn't see the value appear till when I stopped typing for a particular period of time. So this is very useful in case I was making a dynamic search. I don't want to be hitting that endpoint every time I impute a value. That will be inefficient, and that could also make the server to be overwhelmed. But if I use this debounce function, I'm able to delay that till when the user stops typing for a particular period of time. So let's move over to the next hook. You almost always need to store something in local storage, and this is where this hook comes in handy, and it's called useLocalStorage hook. So you don't want to be handling that manually or rewriting that every time, that's logic every time. So you just put it in a hook and you're able to use it wherever you want to use it. So let's see how we can use it, and also how we can create one in our React application code. So this is how I'm using the useLocalStorage hook, and right here I'm trying to switch between light or dark theme. So what I'm doing is I'm using a button to set theme or to toggle between theme. So what I'm just going to do is I'm going to move into this useLocalStorage hook to see how I actually created it. So here we have a useState, and this is what we are doing right here in our useState, and we are also using a useEffect to perform this action, as this is something outside our DOM manipulation or outside React. So we are using useEffect to access Windows local storage and to set the item that we want to set using the key, and also JSON.stringify. This is just like a standard, and when what we are doing is that we are returning a value here. And what we can do here is to move to the browser to see how this actually works. When you switch to dark theme, you can see that the current theme is dark, and when you switch to light theme, you can see the current theme is light. If you have gotten to this part of the video, well, I want to say a big congratulations, because you're among the 1% of the 1%. And if you feel you are enjoying this video, or you feel you're finding the information that I'm sharing useful, please give me a like and a subscribe. Right now we want to go into the next hook, which is the useMediaQuery hook. This hook is an important hook, and you can use it to know when there is changes in the size of the screen. So let's go into the code and see how to apply this in our application code. So this is how we are using useMediaQuery hook right here, and we are using it from Materials UI. We are using MediaQuery hook from Materials UI, and this is a library packed with components that you can find useful for your application, and you can also find useful hooks also in Materials UI library. So what you have to do is to install Materials UI. So right here I'll try and install it, and I already have it installed. So once you install it, you can start using whatever is in the library. So what we are doing is that we are watching for small screen size by using max width 600px, and we are looking for medium screen size, which is between 601px and 1024px, and then we are looking for large screen size. As you can see, that is what we're just doing over here, and we're trying to display it. So if I go over to my browser, you see the current screen size is large, so I can adjust these. As you can see, I can adjust these, and you see that when I adjust it, you see the screen size has reduced. It's telling us this is medium, and if I go over to small, you can see that it's showing that it's a small screen size. So this is a very, very useful hook, and you can do whatever you want to do with it concerning adjusting based on screen size, adjusting your response to the user based on screen size. The next hook we are going to be diving into is similar to the useMediaQuery hook. The difference is that it watches the changes in size for a particular element or for a particular DOM element, and this hook is called the useResizeObserver hook. So let's dive in and see how to create one and also use one in our React application code. So here is how we are using the useResizeObserver. So what we are doing is actually we are passing this box ref into the useResizeObserver, and we are attaching the reference to this div element here. We want to watch the change in the size of the div element right here, and then we want to display whatever size we got from this useResizeObserver to this DOM right here. We want to display it to the DOM so you can see the changes when the div element change. So if we move into the useResizeObserver hook, you are going to see how it's built. So we have a reference right here, and then we have a state. We are setting state with the width and the height, and then we have the useEffect that we want to run when the reference changes. So we are checking if this reference is actually valid first of all, and then we have this handle resize, which I'll come back to, and then we're calling the windows.resizeObserver class, and we are passing in this handle resize function. So what we are doing is that we are calling observer.observe. So we want to observe that element for changes in that element, and that what changes we want to observe is the resize changes. So once there is a change in size, this function is called, and we are going to try and get the width and the height and set that width and the height to our state. So that is what we are doing right here. It's so simple. So if I head over to the browser, you can see that this is what the width and the height is. I'm going to try and resize this manually because I don't think it's going to resize. It's just going to remain the same as the width and the height is stagnant. So I'm just going to try and resize this manually. I'm just going to call make the width to be equals to 900 px. Okay, yes, I'm going to do that. So I'm going to make it width. Sorry, I don't know how to spell. So as you can see, the width changes. Our observer is actually working. So feel free to make use of this hook however you wish to make use of it. So the last but not the least hook on my list is the useHideOnClickOutside. So this is a very long name, and this is why I call it actually. It can be called something else by someone else. So this help you to actually perform an action when the user clicks outside an element. So when it's not inside that bounding box of an element and the user clicks somewhere outside, it helps you perform some certain action. I actually find this useful for modals. I use this to close modals when a user clicks outside, somewhere outside that modal. So let's go into the code base and see how to implement one. This is a typical way of using the useHideOnClickOutside. So right here we are passing a callback to this useHideOnClickOutside, which is setting our state to false, and we are also using the ref that is returned from this useOnClickOutside hook to attach it to this div right here. So when you click outside this div or this div element, it actually closes the dialog. So that is how it works. So if I move into this useHideOnClickOutside, you can see how the internals are. So we are just trying to listen to a DOM event, and we are trying to call that handler when that mouse down event is called. So this is how it looks like inside the useHideOnClickOutside hook. And if we go over to our DOM, you can see it when I open this dialog and I click anywhere outside this dialog. I'm clicking inside the dialog right now. If I click anywhere outside the dialog closes. So feel free to use this hook and feel free to apply it wherever you want to apply it. Finally, we have gotten to the end of this video, and I've gone over 17 commonly used React hooks. Although I didn't mention some of them, like the use dispatch and use selector that is used in libraries like React Redux and many other libraries that are similar to that. But I have gone over many of them that you will likely find in any React project, and you can also implement in your own project. So if you have anyone that I've not mentioned in your mind, you can feel free to drop them in the comment section that you almost always find in any project, or you always use in almost all your React projects. You should drop them in the comment section, and you should also give me a like, a subscribe, so that I can keep making videos like this. See you next time. Cheers.